Just, to give a little bit more background, a couple of days ago, I believe it was Thursday before kickoff of the Commanders Bears game, Seth Wickersham and a couple other authors on ESPN did an article about Dan Snyder and a more in-depth look of what's going on behind the scenes, like more than just looking into the sexual harassment and toxic workplace allegations, but how this man gets along with other owners in the league, how bad the stadium is, how the legislative branches in Virginia and Maryland have essentially shut down building a new stadium for these guys, and that's why FedEx Field is such a dump. And how even though Dan Snyder was supposed to not be involved in team activities during his I guess de facto suspension from the Beth Wilkinson report that has yet to see the light of day. There was a lot of traction going into this meeting, and Jim Irsay, like you said, Jay, off the top, like he really broke ranks, and he went off the reservation and said that these allegations, they warrant the merit for Dan Snyder to potentially be voted out. And one of the other reporters, I forget who it was, followed up saying, well, do you think you have the necessary 24 votes out of it? And he's like, yeah, I believe that if we were to have a vote today, we would get those 24 votes. And it's kind of interesting because, I've been on this podcast. We've been doing this for what, Jay, like 3 years. And, you're always good for, once a year references of me calling Jim Irsay drunk Jim Irsay. But like a big part of the article by ESPN was how Dan Snyder had allegedly had private investigators dig up dirt on these owners. And Jim Irsay essentially said, damn the torpedoes. Like if you want to find something on me, go for it. I mean, everything that he's done is a matter of public record. DUIs with controlled substances in the cars and, alcohol problems and whatnot. So, I got to kind of tip my hat to Jim Irsay for being the one that seems to be like the silent majority. I think a lot of owners are not on board with Dan Snyder anymore. I mean, at the end of the day, Snyder kind of cooked his goose when he was withholding money from the league fund and the league pool of revenue with ticket sales and whatnot. So Jim Irsay stood up and said what everyone was thinking, and I think that kind of put a hair across Roger Goodell's ass if you looked at some of the questions he was getting at about it during his presser yesterday. But Jay, unless you saw something different, have any owners come out and refuted what Irsay has said?
No, they haven't. And just timeline wise here, that ESPN article broke over the weekend. They had the league meetings on Tuesday. And then I believe it was, last night where Daniel Snyder sent an actual memo out to other owners that got leaked saying, it was a fairly long statement, but the one key word, one key phrase out of that statement was, he said, I have never instructed or authorized my lawyers to hire any private investigator on my behalf for such purpose, and I never would. The purpose being, obviously, investigating and finding dirt on the owner and the commissioner. So it seems like it's going downhill for him quick here, and now it seems like if he's lost his biggest ally in the NFL owner ranks, which is Jerry Jones, then I think it's game over. I mean, we can all agree that Robert Kraft and Jerry Jones are probably the most powerful owners. And if Jerry Jones turns on you, bro, it's a wrap, right? And I think a lot of times, you can get away with pretty stupid stuff, whether it's having a crappy stadium or this sexual harassment lawsuit or that lawsuit. All these things come and go in the NFL. We've seen it over the years. But when you start messing with people's money, when you start taking money out of the owner's pocket, that's something these billionaires will not look past. So I think he cooked his own goose, like you said, Puma. It's basically a waiting game, and let's call on Jeff Bezos. Come on down, new owner of the Washington Commanders.
What'd be kind of hilarious is, Bezos, the Amazon mogul, also owns the Washington Post. And Daniel Snyder, this is in the article, he hates the Washington Post. So if he ever was going to leak any information, it would be to the New York Times or I forget the other name of the newspaper. But he hated WAPO so much that it would just be, schadenfreude for Jeff Bezos to own the team while owning the the Washington Post, but it's bananas, Jay. I mean, there's parts of the article where he's saying like it's like the mafia. I have enough info to bring this mother down. Like, oh my god, it's bananas. It's like stuff you would say when you're working at like Burger King, entry level job, barely making minimum wage, and you finally have enough one day, and I go like, Jay, I'm gonna burn this mother down. Let's burn this mother down. Like that is kind of like the mad dog in a corner mentality that Dan Snyder has, and like the walls are closing in. He's got 5 investigations, one of them by Congress, another one by an attorney general or former district attorney, I should say. It's wild. Now, Jay.
Well, one quick point of that, I really do believe he's done for, and I think he's just lying at this point. I don't think he has any information on these owners or the commissioner, because if he did, it'd come out by now. Because at the end of the day, let's be real, this is over for Daniel Snyder. No, I don't know if it's this year, next year, or 2 years from now. It's done for him. Like the wheels are in motion. The investigations are going. This paper trail is being written up. The owners are openly talking about him basically being voted out. So if he does have any dirt, now is the time to bring it out, or else it's over.
Mm-hmm. I was just gonna say, like, this time next year, do you think the Commanders are going to be up for sale, or do you think this is still going to be a Dan Snyder owned team?
Well, Dan Snyder is gonna. He's not gonna sell a team. I think he's gonna force the owners to vote him out, right? At the end of the day, I think Daniel Snyder is that kind of person who is just a little bit obviously full of himself, but he digs his heels in. He seems like he's very disrespectful. I saw this story about how when he first got into the league in 1998, at the first meeting, he was openly like being disrespectful to the owners, basically called them a bunch of old timers, and they didn't really know what's the new wave, and this is how I'm going to run my organization way better than you ever could. And looking back on it, it looks like he failed miserably at running his organization, right?
Not even that, the Bidwell story.
Exactly, right? So there's just so much there, and it seems like he's that typical, narcissistic kind of person who is not going to go on his free will, but he's going to be forced out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this time next year, I think he's going to make the owner set a precedent and essentially vote him out. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's going to be litigated, but I do think there's going to be a for sale sign up. I just don't know if it's going to be sold by this time next year.